Did you know that you do not have to cut out carbohydrates to fix your blood sugar? In fact, the fastest way to bring your numbers down is actually more about adding foods, not eliminating entire food groups. And this is not theory. Hundreds of patients have turned their numbers around in just days by adding specific foods to the meals they were already eating. Not temporarily either. They are still keeping their sugars low without medications for months and even years after making these changes. But here is what almost no one explains to you in a 1-2 minute office visit. High blood sugar almost always starts upstream with a hormone called insulin. Insulin is the key that unlocks your cells, so glucose, the sugar floating in your blood, can get out of your bloodstream and into the cell where it actually belongs. That is its entire job. Open the door, let the sugar in, keep your blood clean. The problem is that when you have spent years riding the blood sugar roller coaster, eating foods that spike your sugar high and then crash it low over and over again, your cells stop answering the door. The insulin knocks and knocks, but the cell stays shut. That is what doctors call insulin resistance, and it affects an estimated 40% of adults between the ages of 18 and 44, and well over 50% of those over 60. Your pancreas sees the sugar piling up in your blood and responds the only way it knows how, by pumping out more and more insulin to compensate. Your blood sugar climbs anyway, and the standard medical answer is a prescription that pushes even more insulin into a system that is already drowning in it. There is no revenue in a short office visit to teach you how food talks directly to your insulin receptors, so that is exactly what we are going to do right now. Every one of these 10 foods does one of 3 specific jobs. It slows the sugar coming in, so your pancreas never has to panic. It cools the chronic inflammation that keeps your cells deaf to insulin. Or it walks right up to the insulin receptor and wakes it back up, so your own body does the work it was designed to do. You do not have to add all 10 tomorrow. Stack them in over the next couple of weeks and let each one build on the last. The first food is fenugreek seeds. These are small, hard, amber-colored seeds, and you can find them in the spice aisle of almost any grocery store for a couple of dollars. If you ignore this one because it sounds exotic, you are walking past one of the most powerful blood sugar tools on the shelf, and it costs less than your morning coffee. Here is what fenugreek does inside you. The seed is packed with a soluble fiber called galactomannan. When it hits the water in your stomach, it swells into a thick gel, and that gel physically slows how fast your stomach empties carbohydrates into your small intestine. Slower emptying means the sugar trickles into your blood instead of flooding it. No flood, no giant spike, no panic dump of insulin. Consider that the average adult consumes between 200 and 300 grams of carbohydrates per day, and without any break on absorption, that entire load can slam into your bloodstream within minutes of eating. Fenugreek puts a brake on that process. On top of the fiber, fenugreek carries an amino acid called 4-hydroxyisoleucine that nudges your pancreas to release insulin more efficiently and helps your muscle cells take up glucose on their own. Clinical studies have shown fasting glucose reductions of 13 to 25% in people who used fenugreek consistently over several weeks. To use it, take 1 teaspoon of whole seeds and soak them in a glass of water overnight. In the morning, drink the water and eat the softened seeds before breakfast. If the slightly bitter taste is too much, grind them and stir half a teaspoon into yogurt or sprinkle it over your eggs. Start low because this fiber is strong and your gut needs a few days to adjust. Number 2 is cinnamon, and you almost certainly already have it in your cupboard. But the kind you have matters, and most people grab the wrong one. The common grocery store cinnamon is cassia, and it carries a compound called coumarin that is hard on your liver in large daily doses. The tolerable daily intake of coumarin is only about 0.1 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and a single teaspoon of cassia cinnamon can exceed that limit. The one you want is Ceylon cinnamon, sometimes labeled true cinnamon. It is milder, it is safer to take every day, and it contains only trace amounts of coumarin. What makes cinnamon work is a group of polyphenols, natural plant compounds that behave almost like insulin themselves. They help your insulin receptors grip glucose more tightly, and they slow your stomach from emptying too fast after a meal. Research out of the Human Nutrition Program at the USDA found that under half a teaspoon a day meaningfully lowered fasting glucose in adults with type 2 diabetes. Use about a quarter to a half teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon daily. Stir it into your oatmeal, your coffee, or a smoothie. The trick is to pair it with a carbohydrate meal because that is exactly when you want your receptors gripping harder and your stomach slowing down. Third on the list is broccoli sprouts. And I want you to pay close attention here because this one is the most underused food in this entire list. Not full-grown broccoli, the little 3-day-old sprouts. Ignore that distinction, and you miss almost all the benefit. Broccoli sprouts are loaded with a compound called sulforaphane, and the sprouts contain somewhere between 50 and 100 times more of it than a head of mature broccoli. That is not a small difference. That is the difference between a food that moves your numbers and a food that barely registers. Sulforaphane does something none of the other foods on this list do quite as directly. It goes to your liver and quiets down the overnight glucose factory. 16 to 9 landscape infographic. Viral health TikTok style. White background with subtle light blue gradient top. Rounded red-orange border. Number D. 94A, 3D, 8px, 25px, corner radius. Bold Montserrat black typography. Here is what most people do not understand about their morning reading. Your liver makes sugar while you sleep. It is supposed to. It releases small amounts of glucose to keep your brain and organs fueled through the night. But in insulin resistance, that process goes haywire. The liver loses its off switch and dumps far too much sugar into your bloodstream between midnight and dawn. That is why so many people over 60 wake up with a fasting number of 130, 150, even 180, and cannot figure out how their sugar went up when they did not eat a single bite all night. Research suggests that the liver can produce between 150 and 300 milligrams of glucose per minute during overnight fasting, and in someone with insulin resistance, that rate can double. A 2017 study from Lund University in Sweden gave concentrated sulforaphane to people with type 2 diabetes and brought their fasting blood sugar down measurably, with the strongest effect in exactly the people whose sugar was hardest to control. These were patients whose morning numbers had resisted other interventions, and sulforaphane still moved the needle. You can grow broccoli sprouts on your own kitchen counter in a mason jar for pennies, or buy them in the produce section of most grocery stores. A small handful, about a quarter cup, on a salad or a sandwich, most days, is plenty to get a clinically meaningful amount of sulforaphane. Do not cook them hard because high heat destroys the active compound. Eat them raw or barely wilted. Number 4 is the avocado. Most people think of it as a fat to avoid because of the calories, and that fear is costing them dearly. A medium avocado contains roughly 250 calories and about 21 grams of fat, and for years people saw those numbers and put it back on the shelf. But the fat in an avocado is monounsaturated fat, the same family as olive oil, and it is one of the most blood sugar-friendly things you can put on a plate. The reason is simple. That healthy fat and the roughly 10 grams of fiber inside an avocado slow your entire meal down. When you add half an avocado to a plate of rice or toast, you are not removing the carbohydrate. You are putting a brake on how fast it turns into blood sugar. The glucose climbs gently instead of spiking. Consider that the American Diabetes Association recommends keeping post-meal blood sugar below 180 milligrams per deciliter. Yet studies show that nearly 60% of adults with prediabetes regularly exceed that number after meals containing refined carbohydrates. Adding healthy fat to those same meals can reduce the post-meal spike by 20 to 30% simply by slowing the rate of absorption. Over time, monounsaturated fat has also been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, meaning your cells answer that insulin knock a little faster and a little more willingly. In practice, this is the easiest food on the list to turn into a daily habit because it makes every meal more filling and you stop reaching for a snack an hour later. That mid-morning craving that sends you toward the cookie jar or the vending machine quietly disappears when your body has steady fuel, instead of a sugar spike followed by a crash. Half an avocado a day is a sensible amount for most people. Put it on your eggs in the morning, mash it onto whole grain toast, or add it to a salad that already has a starch in it. Anywhere you have a carbohydrate on your plate, an avocado softens the blow. So far, every food has done the same quiet work, slowing the sugar down or waking the receptor up, and we are only 4 in. The next 2 are the ones that target the deeper problem underneath all of it, the chronic inflammation that keeps your cells deaf to insulin no matter what else you do. Number 5 is chia seeds. These are tiny gray and black seeds, and they punch far above their size. If you have ever seen chia sit in liquid for a few minutes and turn into a thick pudding, you have already seen exactly how it works inside your gut. Chia is one of the richest sources of soluble fiber you can buy. Just 2 tablespoons contain roughly 10 grams of fiber, which is already a third of the 25 to 30 grams that health experts recommend most adults consume daily. Yet studies show that the average adult over 60 gets barely 15 grams a day, roughly half of what their body needs. When chia meets the water in your stomach, it forms that same thick gel we talked about with fenugreek, and that gel wraps around the carbohydrates in your meal and slows their absorption to a crawl. The sugar releases slowly and steadily, so you avoid the spike and the crash that leaves you shaky, irritable, and reaching for something sweet an hour later. But chia does more than just slow things down. It carries a plant-based omega-3 fat called alpha-linolenic acid. And this is where chia starts working on the deeper problem. Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the primary drivers of insulin resistance. Your body has been quietly inflamed for years, and that inflammation interferes with the insulin signal at the surface of your cells. The omega-3 inches chia helps cool that inflammation down so the cells can start hearing insulin again. Research published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that adults with type 2 diabetes who consumed chia seeds daily for 12 weeks experienced significant improvements in inflammatory markers, alongside better blood sugar control. 1 to 2 tablespoons a day does the job. Stir it into yogurt, drop it in a glass of water with a squeeze of lemon, or blend it into a smoothie. Give it about 10 minutes to gel before you drink it, and drink plenty of water alongside because all that fiber needs liquid to move through your digestive system properly. Without enough water, that same fiber that helps you can cause bloating and discomfort. A good rule of thumb is to drink at least 1 full glass of water for every tablespoon of chia you consume. Number 6 is fatty fish, and I mean salmon and mackerel specifically. This one does not work by slowing your meal down. It works on the deeper problem, the very reason your cells went deaf to insulin in the first place. Insulin resistance is driven in large part by chronic inflammation. When your body is quietly inflamed year after year, that inflammation physically interferes with the insulin signal at the surface of your cells. Think of it this way. Insulin arrives at the cell and tries to deliver its message, but inflammation has built a wall of static around the receptor. The message gets garbled. The cell never opens the door. The sugar stays in your blood. Salmon and mackerel are loaded with 2 omega-3 fatty acids called EPA and DHA, and these are among the most powerful, natural, anti-inflammatory compounds we know of. They lower the inflammatory signals. The cell membrane gets healthier and more fluid, and the insulin receptor starts working the way it was designed to. The numbers behind this are striking. The American Heart Association recommends at least 2 servings of fatty fish per week, yet surveys show that nearly 80% of adults over 60 fall short of that target. Meanwhile, research published in the journal Diabetes Care found that regular consumption of omega-3 rich fish improved insulin sensitivity by up to 40% in adults with metabolic syndrome over an 8-week period. Those participants did not change anything else about their diets. They simply added fish twice a week, and their cells started responding to insulin significantly better. There is another benefit that often goes unnoticed. Chronic inflammation does not just block insulin. It damages blood vessels, raises blood pressure, and accelerates the progression of every complication that comes with high blood sugar, from nerve damage in your feet to vision loss in your eyes. The EPA and DHA in fatty fish work against all of those pathways simultaneously. In 15 years of clinical practice, the patients who eat fatty fish twice a week consistently have calmer, more stable numbers and better blood pressure to go with it. Aim for 2 servings a week, about the size of your palm each. Wild salmon, mackerel, sardines, and herring are all excellent choices. Bake it, grill it, or buy it canned if that is easier on your budget. Canned mackerel and sardines often cost less than $2 per can and deliver the same omega-3 content as fresh. They are some of the cheapest yet most powerful foods in this entire list. Now, the next 2 foods are the ones that change your mornings and your snacking habits in ways that make everything else we have covered work even better. Number 7 is walnuts. Of all the nuts you could choose, this is the one I would point you toward first because of what it does for the lining of your blood vessels and for your insulin at the same time. Most people do not realize that high blood sugar is not just a numbers problem on a lab report. It is actively damaging the inside of your body every single day. One of the first things it attacks is your endothelium, the thin, delicate lining inside every blood vessel you have. When that lining gets damaged, blood flow slows down, blood pressure climbs, and the risk of heart attack and stroke goes up sharply. Adults with type 2 diabetes are 2 to 4 times more likely to develop cardiovascular disease than those without it. And that damage starts with the endothelium long before any heart event ever happens. Walnuts are rich in polyunsaturated fat and the same plant-based omega-3 found in chia seeds. That combination improves endothelial function, helping your blood vessels relax and expand the way they are supposed to. But walnuts do something else that matters, just as much for your blood sugar. The fat, fiber, and protein in a small handful of walnuts blunt the rise in blood sugar after a meal and have been shown to lower fasting insulin. Fasting insulin is the number underneath your blood sugar that tells you how hard your pancreas is straining to keep up. When that number drops, it means your cells are finally starting to do their share of the work again. A study published in the journal Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism found that participants who consumed walnuts daily for 6 months showed significant improvements in both fasting insulin levels and overall insulin sensitivity. The researchers noted that the effect was strongest when walnuts replaced processed snacks, rather than being added on top of them. That distinction matters. Eat a small handful as a snack instead of crackers or a cookie, and you have taken what would have been a sugar spike and turned it into a flat line. A small handful is about a quarter cup, roughly 7 to 10 whole walnuts, which gives you approximately 190 calories, 4 grams of protein, and 2 grams of fiber. Keep them raw or dry roasted, not the candied or honey-coated kind that add 8 to 12 grams of sugar per serving and undo everything the walnut was trying to do for you. Toss them into a salad, eat them between meals, or chop them over your morning oatmeal alongside that Ceylon cinnamon we covered earlier. Number 8 is eggs. Whole eggs, yolk included. For years, people were told the yolk was the enemy, that eating it would raise your cholesterol and clog your arteries. That outdated advice pushed millions of people away from one of the most nutritious foods on the planet and straight towards sugary breakfast cereals and flavored instant oatmeal packets that were far worse for their blood sugar. A single serving of many popular breakfast cereals contains 12 to 17 grams of added sugar, which is already half the daily limit that the American Heart Association recommends for women and a third of the limit for men. Let me set the record straight on eggs. A whole egg is almost pure protein and fat with virtually no carbohydrate, which means on its own it barely moves your blood sugar at all. One large egg contains about 6 grams of protein, 5 grams of healthy fat, and less than 1 gram of carbohydrate. But the real power of eggs is what researchers call the second meal effect. When you start your day with eggs instead of toast or cereal, you steady your blood sugar not just at breakfast, but all the way through to lunch. You walk into your next meal with calmer numbers and a smaller spike. The protein and fat keep you full and satisfied, so the mid-morning cravings that send you toward the cookie jar or the vending machine quietly disappear. Research published in the International Journal of Obesity found that participants who ate eggs for breakfast consumed roughly 400 fewer calories over the following 24 hours compared to those who ate a bagel breakfast with the same number of calories. That reduction was not willpower, it was biochemistry. The protein and fat told their brains they were full, and the stable blood sugar meant no crash-driven hunger 2 hours later. 2 to 3 whole eggs in the morning is a solid target for most people. Scramble them, boil them ahead for the week, or fold in some spinach and tomatoes for extra fiber and nutrients. Put that half avocado from earlier right on top, and you have built what I would call a near-perfect blood sugar breakfast. Protein, healthy fat, fiber, and virtually zero sugar. Your glucose stays steady, your energy stays even, and you make it to lunch without your body begging for something sweet. Now, the last 2 foods on this list are the ones with the most immediate and measurable impact you can see on a glucose meter, starting tonight if you want to. Number 9 is apple cider vinegar, and this is the one with the fastest visible effect on a glucose meter of anything on this list. If you have a meter at home, you can literally watch this one work tonight. The active ingredient is acetic acid, and it does 2 things at once. It slows your stomach from emptying, so the carbohydrates in your meal arrive in your bloodstream gradually instead of all at once. And it helps your muscles pull glucose out of your blood and use it for fuel rather than letting it sit there and accumulate. Your skeletal muscles are responsible for absorbing roughly 80% of the glucose in your blood after a meal. And when those muscles are resistant to insulin, that absorption slows to a crawl, and your blood sugar stays elevated for hours. Acetic acid helps bypass part of that resistance and gets glucose moving into muscle cells more efficiently. The research here is strong. Work led by a team at Arizona State University found that a tablespoon of vinegar before a carbohydrate meal lowered the after-meal blood sugar spike by roughly 20 to 30% in people with insulin resistance. That is a drug-sized effect from something that costs a few dollars a bottle. To put that in perspective, some first-line diabetes medications aim for a post-meal reduction of 20 to 25%, and they come with a list of side effects and a monthly price tag that can run anywhere from $30 to several $100, depending on your insurance. Take 1 tablespoon, and this part matters. Diluted in a full glass of water 10 to 15 minutes before a meal that has carbohydrates in it. Always dilute it. Never drink it straight because the acid is harsh on tooth enamel and can burn your throat and esophagus over time. Some people find it easier to drink it through a straw to minimize contact with their teeth. And if you take any medication for blood sugar already, talk to your doctor first because vinegar combined with that medication can push your sugar down faster than you expect and drop you into a low, which brings its own set of dangerous symptoms, including dizziness, confusion, and fainting. The 10th food is lentils, and this one proves the whole point of everything we have been talking about. Lentils are a carbohydrate, and they will lower your blood sugar. If that sounds like a contradiction, it is only because you have been told that all carbs are the enemy. They are not. The type of carbohydrate matters far more than the amount. Lentils are built from a slow carbohydrate called resistant starch, wrapped in soluble fiber and a healthy dose of plant protein. 1 cup of cooked lentils contains roughly 40 grams of carbohydrates, but it also delivers 16 grams of fiber and 18 grams of protein. That combination means the glucose inside the lentil is released into your blood slowly and steadily over hours instead of all at once. Compare that to a cup of white rice, which contains a similar amount of carbohydrates but only 0.6 grams of fiber and far less protein. The rice hits your bloodstream like a wave. The lentils arrive like a gentle tide. Lentils also carry the second meal effect we talked about with eggs. A bowl of lentil soup at lunch gives you steadier sugar not just through the afternoon but all the way into the evening. Research published in the Journal of Nutrition found that when participants replaced half of their white rice with lentils in a single meal, their post-meal blood sugar response dropped by approximately 20 to 35%. That reduction carried over into the next meal, even when the next meal contained no lentils at all. Your body was still riding the steady wave from hours earlier. Clinically, swapping white rice or white potato for lentils a few times a week is one of the most reliable ways to bring down an A1C, which is your 3-month average blood sugar, and the number your doctor watches most closely to track the overall direction of your health. The American Diabetes Association considers an A1C below 5.7% normal, 5.7 to 6.4 pre-diabetic, and 6.5 or above diabetic. Small dietary swaps like replacing refined starches with lentils can move that number by half a point or more over 3 to 6 months. And that half point can be the difference between adding a medication and removing one. Aim for half a cup to a full cup of cooked lentils a few times a week. Use them in a soup, a stew, or a cold salad dressed with olive oil and a splash of the apple cider vinegar we just covered. They are filling, they are cheap, often less than $2 per pound of dry lentils, which yields roughly 6 to 8 servings. And they stretch a meal further than almost anything else in your kitchen. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Mrs. Lan. She is 63 years old, recently retired, and she came in frightened because her fasting sugar was sitting around 180 milligrams per deciliter every single morning. Her doctor had just told her it was time to add a second medication. She did not want to spend the rest of her life climbing the medication ladder, adding one pill after another while her numbers kept creeping up anyway. And she was scared because she had watched her own mother lose toes and then her eyesight to this same disease. She knew where the road led if nothing changed. We did not cut her carbohydrates to nothing. We did not hand her a starvation diet or tell her to stop eating the foods she loved. We added eggs and half an avocado in the morning instead of her usual bowl of sweetened cereal. A tablespoon of apple cider vinegar diluted in water before her bigger meals. Lentils swapped in for the white rice she had been eating every day for decades. A small handful of walnuts in the afternoon instead of the cookie she reached for out of habit. Fatty fish twice a week for dinner. A 1/4 teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon stirred into her morning coffee. And a small pile of broccoli sprouts on her sandwich at lunch. Within the first week, her fasting numbers started dropping. Not dramatically at first, but enough that she noticed and enough to keep her going. Within 3 months, working alongside her own doctor every step of the way, she had come off that second medication entirely. Her A1C had moved from the diabetic range back toward normal. And here is the part that matters most. 2 years later, those numbers have held. She did not starve herself. She actually ate more food than before. Just the right food, and her own body did the rest. Let me tie all 10 of these together because this is the reason they work when cutting carbs alone so often fails. Every one of these foods is handing your insulin its job back without starving you. The fiber foods, the fenugreek, the chia, the lentils, they slow the glucose down so your pancreas never has to panic and flood your system with insulin it cannot use. The fatty fish, the walnuts, and the chia cool the chronic inflammation that has been jamming the insulin signal at the surface of your cells for years. The cinnamon and the vinegar walk right up to the insulin receptor and help it grip glucose again the way it was designed to. And the broccoli sprouts go straight to your liver and tell it to stop dumping sugar into your blood while you sleep. Do that meal after meal, day after day, and the cell that stopped answering the door slowly starts opening it on the first knock again. That is what reversing insulin resistance actually means at the cellular level. And once it happens, your body holds your sugar down on its own, which is exactly why Mrs. Land's numbers stayed low for 2 full years without that second medication. Walnuts are rich in polyunsaturated fat and the same plant-based omega-3 found in chia seeds. That combination improves endothelial function, helping your blood vessels relax and expand the way they are supposed to. But walnuts do something else that matters, just as much for your blood sugar. The fat, fiber, and protein in a small handful of walnuts blunt the rise in blood sugar after a meal and have been shown to lower fasting insulin. Fasting insulin is the number underneath your blood sugar that tells you how hard your pancreas is straining to keep up. When that number drops, it means your cells are finally starting to do their share of the work again. A study published in the journal Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism found that participants who consumed walnuts daily for 6 months showed significant improvements in both fasting insulin levels and overall insulin sensitivity. The researchers noted that the effect was strongest when walnuts replaced processed snacks rather than being added on top of them. That distinction matters. Eat a small handful as a snack instead of crackers or a cookie, and you have taken what would have been a sugar spike and turned it into a flat line. A small handful is about a quarter cup, roughly 7 to 10 whole walnuts, which gives you approximately 190 calories, 4 grams of protein, and 2 grams of fiber. Keep them raw or dry roasted, not the candied or honey-coated kind that add 8 to 12 grams of sugar per serving and undo everything the walnut was trying to do for you. Toss them into a salad, eat them between meals, or chop them over your morning oatmeal alongside that Ceylon cinnamon we covered earlier.